Stay tuned for the latest message excerpt from Impact Church.
Now, I think you could forgive Peter in that moment. Jesus is doing this fantastic ministry in his heart. And if Peter's like, all right, well, that's great, but you remember that thing I did? Remember I denied you? You can't be serious, Jesus. You can't really, that's great, but you're going to remember what I did, and then you're going to take it all back again, right? Sometimes we hold on to our sin, we hold on to our shame, we hold on to our failure, and you don't need to. Jesus hasn't. He's let it go. So Jesus comes to Peter and he addresses the very thing. He does it in a very gentle way, if you can see this. He kind of gets up in his business and he doesn't let it go, but neither does he point his finger in his face and condemn him. Right? So he denied Jesus 3 times. 3 times Jesus asks him, hey, Peter, do you love me? And gives Peter the chance to say, yeah, I do. You know I do. Now, the next part here, this is... There's lots of different interpretations for this. This is mine. I'm putting that disclaimer out there. But I think that there's something significant. If you know the story, Jesus says to Peter, after he meets him, he's out of the boat. He's actually run out of the boat. I don't know if he ran on the water. I don't know. It's kind of funny. He says that he put his clothes on and ran to Jesus. So who knows what happened there. But they have fish after... We talked about that in our small group. It was funny. It's like, what's the guy doing fishing naked? That's weird. Anyways, so they're Jesus and Peter. Jesus goes up to Peter and says, Peter, do you love me? And Peter says, Lord, I do. You know I do. Jesus says, well, then feed my sheep. And he says to him again, Peter, do you love me? Peter says, Lord, you know I love you. Then tend my sheep. And then the 3rd time he says, Peter, do you love me? And Peter's like, man, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus says, feed my sheep. Now, I think there's something a little more going on here. There's something a little more going on. So if you, when Jesus says to Peter, do you love me? What he's saying is, Peter, do you agape me? It's a different Greek word for love. So the word the Greek word for that love is agape or agape or however you say it. And it means this. It means to prefer, to love by embracing God's will, choosing his choices and obeying them through his power. So we've got a notion of agape that is unconditional love. And it really is. It's unconditional. God's love towards you. It's this sloppy, all-embracing love. And in many respects, it really is kind of the highest form of love. But it's unconditional towards you because God has chosen to love you no matter what. He's made a decision about you that he is going to love you, and you're not going to change his mind. Nobody's going to change his mind about you. But it's rooted in his decision. It's his will to love you. It's his choice to love you. For some reason, he saw you. He saw everything about you and was like, I love you. And you're like, well, what about this? Love you. What about that? Still love you. What about that? Love you. He's chosen to love you. Now, the thing about agape love is when you turn that around and you try to offer God agape love, and it's not the flow of the Holy Spirit, it's not the fruit of the Spirit in you, what you're ending up doing is you're offering to God the best ability you have to choose his choices, to do his will. So in effect, what Jesus is saying to Peter is this: Peter, do you love me by choosing my choices all the time? Peter, do you love me by always doing my will? Do you love me by surrendering your heart to me all the time so that you never, ever don't not do my will? You never don't choose what I want you to do. And of course, Peter can't say yes. He can't. He's failed. He's done something wrong. And he knows it. So he can't say to Jesus, yeah, Jesus, you know I always do your will. Because he didn't. He denied him 3 times. So what Peter says is, Lord, you know I phileo you. It's a different kind of love. You know I love you. And that love is a love of friendship. It's with regard to affection. It's to show warm affection and intimate friendship. So in effect, what Peter says to Jesus is, Lord, you know that I didn't do your will. I didn't love you by doing what you wanted me to do. But I still love you. I still have this intimate friendship feeling for you. I have affection for you. I really love you. And Jesus says to him, he doesn't say, well, that's not what I asked. Come on, Peter, I asked you if you could always do what I wanted you to do. He says, no, feed my sheep. So he does it again. Jesus asks him again, hey, Peter, do you love me? Do you always do my will? Do you love me by expressing perfect obedience to my preferences and choices? And Peter again has to say no. But he says, Jesus, you know that I feel for you. You know that I have affection in my heart for you. You know that we have this relationship. The third time, Jesus changes it up, and he goes to Peter. He says, Peter, do you have friendship? Do you have affection for me? He says, Peter, do you phileo me? And Peter's like, Lord, you know I do. You know I do. And I think in that moment, Peter's fully restored. I think in that moment, Peter has realized that what Jesus is after and what he's looking for isn't a perfect commitment to his choices. It's not, hey, Peter, I'll only accept love from you if you can always do what I want you to do. I think in that moment, Peter realizes Jesus wants friendship. He wants relationship. And I think in that moment, he realizes, hey, I messed up, and somehow the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, has still come into my life, and he says, you know what, you're enough. Your love for me, your affection for me, our friendship, that's enough. See, Jesus doesn't go to Peter and say, Peter, you broke the law. You're a sinner. We got to talk. No, he comes and he talks about their relationship. See, sometimes if you get stuck in the realm of failure or you become hyper aware of your sin or something, say you mess something up really bad. Jesus is concerned about you as a person. He's concerned about your relationship. He's not concerned that you violated his holy law. He's taking care of that already. Hope that's okay to say. See, Jesus for Peter was Peter's righteousness. Jesus had already taken care of Peter's sin. It was already dealt with. What needed to be dealt with was Peter's ability to embrace the fact that it was dealt with. What needed to be done is Peter needed an internal rewiring to be able to say, hey, wow, I can still show up in this relationship even though I failed. I can still show up and offer to Jesus my love and my affection, even in a very short history of having messed something up really, really badly. He was able to stay in the relationship. And then something I think beautiful happens. Jesus tells Peter he's going to die. You might think, how's that beautiful? How's that wonderful? Well, I'll tell you what, for Peter, I think what Peter heard is this. Jesus says to Peter, you know what? There was a time when you were younger when you could go anywhere you wanted. You were free. But there is a time coming in your life when you're going to be bound and somebody's going to take you where you don't want to go. Signifying to Peter the kind of death that he was going to die to glorify God. Now, in that moment, I think what Peter's hearing is this. I chickened out. I denied Jesus because I was afraid. I was afraid that somebody was going to take my life like they were going to take Jesus, so I denied him. And here he's got Jesus saying to him basically, hey, Peter, guess what? The very thing that you messed up, you're going to get it right. It's going to be okay. You're going to do it in the end. You're going to make it in the end. And now the basis for that is this, the restored relationship. The basis for his ability to stay is love. See, Peter's like, no, even if all these people fail, I'm never going to fail. I'll never give up on you. I'll never quit you. And he was so rooted in his own, I'm going to say pride. His own stubborn belief that he was right, that he's never going to commit, he's never going to compromise. His commitment level was so great. Jesus, you're so lucky I'm on your team. I'm not going anywhere. And Jesus completely reorientates him. And he says, you know what? You're going to make it. But you're going to make it now because there's love in your life. There's a power of love. And Paul says, love never fails. Love never fails. He completely reorientates him. He addresses his failure and restores him. Prophesies to him, Peter, you're going to make it and it's going to be great. Don't quit. Don't back up. Don't back off. Do you know what qualifies you to feed my sheep? Well, first of all, that I'm your righteousness. And second of all, hang in there in the relationship. Stay in that place of affection. Abide in my love, Jesus said to his disciples earlier. Remain in my Father's love, just as I have. Right? So stay in the relationship. Hang in there. Don't get discouraged. Jesus is taking care of your sin. He already has. It's done. And that's not to marginalize or minimalize sin. It's a big deal. Jesus shows up in Peter's world and actually has a conversation with him. Sometimes you got to talk about it. You really do. But guess what? It's dealt with. It already is. That's not a marginalizing it. That's not saying it's not important. It's so important that he died for it. It's so important that he bore it in his own body. But because he bore it in his own body, it's dealt with. It's done. Let it go. Let it go. Remember Paul there? I have this one compelling focus. I forget about the things in the past and I press on towards what's ahead. We should do that too. Now, lastly, Jesus meets Peter with his regard to his propensity to compare himself with other people. After this beautiful encounter takes place, Jesus, just completely rewires Peter internally. Peter's he's still got this propensity to just pack it in. Here's the thing. Here's how I know this. He's had this moment with Jesus. And then it says Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following him. It's like he just had this moment to moment, this intimate, beautiful encounter. And then he just quickly walks away from Jesus. Well, what about that guy over there? What about him? And the thing about that is this. When you're going to compare yourself with other people, when you're going to compete with other people, when you're going to let other people set the standard for you, what happens is you end up having to turn. You have to turn from Jesus. You have to take your eyes. Pastor mentioned this verse earlier, but it says that we're in a race. We're running with endurance, the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus. That's how you run. That's how you run your race. You keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. But Jesus says to Peter, hey, what's that to you? Peter's like, well, what about that guy? And Jesus says, don't worry about him. What's that got to do with you? You follow me. And I'll tell you what, if you can hear Jesus say to you, you follow me. Zach, follow me. Leave them to me. You follow me. That's going to help you a lot. That's going to help you big time. It really will. So just a couple thoughts about comparison and comparing yourselves. Who are you to judge another servant? To his own master he stands or falls. Indeed, he will stand, for God is able to make him stand. That's true about the person you're comparing yourself to, and it's true about you. You will stand. God is able to make you stand. Next one. 1 Corinthians 4, 3-5. Paul says, it's a small thing for me to be judged by you or anybody else, basically. In fact, I don't even judge myself. That's a great place to be in. I'm not judging myself. I'm not comparing myself to other people. He's like, I'm not aware of anything against me. That's not why I'm justified. Jesus is my righteousness. But don't judge anything before the time. Just let it go. Let it go. So ultimately, what I think happens is this. I think Peter, remember we talked about defaults? You got this, Peter had a default to fishing. He had a default to compare himself with other people. And I think that Jesus ministered to him, rewired him, and gave him a new default. And his new default became love. I'm enough. Jesus loves me. I can show up. I can show up in this relationship. I can show up in my calling. I can show up at work because he loves me, and what he's after is love.